Hi there. Welcome to the Schwowin's Nest. My name is Sandra, and I'm so happy you're here. Today, I am going to show you how I make my classic farmhouse signs. They turn out so beautiful just using regular frames that I either have hanging around the house or that I pick up at the thrift store. I also grabbed a bunch of these Wi-Fi password signs at the Dollar Tree, and that's what I'm going to use as the backing because they're about an eighth of an inch MDF board and they're super easy to cut. I marked with a pencil where I needed to cut this to fit into this frame. It's an 8 by 10, and I'm going to just use my square from the Dollar Tree to draw a straight line. Then I'm going to just use my utility knife and score it about 4 or 5 times, and then I'm almost through. It'll snap super easy. This frame was already black to begin with, but if the frames aren't black, if they're wood or some other type of material, I give them one coat of flat black paint. That's a paint that I just pick up right off the shelf from Walmart, and it's a flat black onyx ready to use. For these signs, I like to use the back of the sign, which is just the solid brown color, as the front of my sign. Then I don't have to be concerned about trying to cover up the black with my white paint. I'm using a flat white paint to paint everything, the sign and the frame itself. I'm not going to worry about painting the back of the frame because I'll be covering that later to make it look more complete. The paint is dry, so I'm going to use some coarse grit sandpaper and very gently go around the edges. I don't want to distress too much right off the bat. It's easier to go over it again than having to repaint if you took too much off. So I'm just going to do the edges on the inside and the outside. I printed my design out on white tissue paper, and I did this by taping the tissue paper to a regular piece of printer paper, and I'll show you how that looks in a little bit. Then I go ahead and cut out the label as close to the print as I can, making sure I have all rounded edges. You don't want to have any square corners for this. So if you have a square label or an image, you're going to want to just round off those edges a little bit. It's just easier to have them rounded when you're using Mod Podge. I'm going to take a small brush, apply the Mod Podge where I want the label to be, and then I'll place it down. This part is really important. You need to make sure that you have your image centered really well before you place it on the Mod Podge. Because this is tissue paper, if you've done anything with napkins, decoupaging, anything like that, once it's down, it's down. You can't fix it or change it. So then what I do is very gently from the inside out, I press down on the tissue paper and make sure that it's nice and adhered. To smooth out any wrinkles and to make sure that it is placed down really well, I keep adding a little tiny bit of Mod Podge to my brush, and I brush always from the inside out. What I'm doing here is I'm pouncing on top of all of the wrinkles and any air bubbles, and what that does with this little brush, and I'm using a very light touch, is just help to squish that tissue paper right down onto the wood, and then you don't have any bubbles. It has a few wrinkles in it, but I'm okay with that because the look I'm going for is more of a vintage label, so I don't mind it having a little bit of wrinkles in it. So you're just going to work at it very gently and softly until you get everything covered with Mod Podge. I like to use things like lavender and boxwood and lamb's ear for my farmhouse signs, and I always just add a little bit of that greenery to the sign to make it look more unique and put my own spin on it. I really love how this one turned out. If I was keeping this sign for myself, I wouldn't worry about what the back looks like, but I am going to be trying to sell these, so I want them to look professional. I cover the back with some craft paper. Now, I have a huge roll that I purchased many years ago, and I'm still working on getting through it, but I do know that the Dollar Tree carries craft paper in a roll. I'm taking some Aleene's tacky glue and making sure that I get right to the edge. I want all of that paper to be stuck on really well, so I do put quite a generous amount on. I've also used Mod Podge and any other type of white glue. I don't like to use hot glue because then that leaves a lump on the back, and I want this to be nice and smooth. You want to make sure that you press firmly and smooth all the paper out over the glue like I'm doing here. Once I'm done, I'm going to flip it around, and then using my craft knife, I'm going to very slowly just cut the edges and trim the paper down. I like to use these hangers. They're called sawtooth hangers, and they go on either with some screws or with little nails. You can find these at the dollar store in a picture hanging kit. I bought a bunch of these on Amazon, so I'm going to be set for a while. This is the screwdriver I like to use. It's called a ratchet screwdriver, and that means that the screwdriver is going to do the work for you. The twisting is so much easier, especially if you have carpal tunnel or arthritis like I do. Another way that I like to put a backing on is to use these garden stakes that I pick up at my Dollarama store. They are amazing and they're really easy to cut, but you could also use jumbo popsicle sticks or pieces of shim, whatever you have on hand. I tend to use this method for smaller frames. You can see that this one isn't that big. And what I'm going to do is cut them all to length and then hot glue them in. This method gives the backing of the sign a shiplap look, which is, of course, definitely classic farmhouse. So the method I use for my signs is always to paint them white and to have a black undertone. So again, this one is already black or a really dark brown. So when I distress, it'll already have that color coming through. I have a few other ones that were not black, so I went ahead and painted them with a flat black, as I mentioned earlier. I thought I had some footage showing you how I apply the tissue paper to printer paper, but this is a picture of what it looks like. I've already cut out my label, but what I do is lay the tissue paper onto printer paper, make sure the tissue paper is a little bit smaller, and then you're going to tape all around the edges. Now, I don't tape every single edge. I tape the four corners and I tape a little bit more on the top where I know it's going to go through the printer just to make sure that it doesn't get torn. I think the best way to find out how it's going to work is to give it a try, but don't put the tissue paper label on your project right away. Put it on another piece of paper or something else where you can fiddle around with it and get the technique down before you actually put it on a project. I'm not like that. I just throw it on my project and cross my fingers and go for it. So it's totally up to you what type of person you are. If you want to just give it a shot and go for it, I say, what the heck? It can't hurt. And the other thing is, if it doesn't work out, you could always just sand off the tissue paper. It's really soft and thin, so it would come off super easy. And then you can try again. I'm just adding a little bit of greenery to the top of this one just to make it look a little bit different. I like to add just a wee bit of greenery and lavender, and I don't want to overpower the vintage feel of this piece. The next two projects, I didn't want to bore you with the same technique over and over again, but I decided to put just a little ring of florals on this one, and this last home sweet home, I decided to leave it just plain. I hope you enjoyed my video today and learned something new that you're going to try. If you're new to my channel, I'd love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and share my video with friends and family. It really helps my channel grow. Bye for now.